Hey guys, my name is Haley Riley, and I'm going to be talking to you guys today about the film that I chose to do for my project, which is Apocalypse Now. So this film comes out in 1979, where, American society is in this kind of, still in the midst of the Cold War, but the Vietnam War has just ended. So there's a lot of history here, so I think I'm going to start with that to kind of set the scene for this film. So after World War II, basically, to make really complicated relationships kind of short, the United States and Russia emerged from World War II as the two major world powers here. So they're kind of struggling for power and influence in European and Asian countries. So here is Russia trying to kind of dominate people and encourage them to go with kind of a communist type government. And then we have the United States trying to empower them, to become kind of more of a democratic society. So we have all these less powerful countries that are being dominated or, attempting to be influenced by these huge world powers. So it's called the Cold War because US and Russia actually never went directly at combat with each other. So not to say that people didn't die, because clearly we see in this movie that they did, unfortunately. So there's a lot of these little kind of conflicts throughout these less powerful countries in Europe and Asia because of this kind of standoff between the United States and Russia here. So that's exactly what happens in Vietnam, where the Vietnamese people are kind of split into two, where one side is advocating for, Russian influence, and the other side is advocating for influence from the United States. So basically, this policy of containment here that Harry Truman comes up with basically states that the United States will get involved, whether that be sending military overseas or getting involved politically, basically saying that the United States will get involved to limit Russia's influence on these smaller, less powerful countries. So here we are. This film is kind of a depiction of the Vietnam War and kind of the horrors and absolute brutality that these both the Vietnamese people and the U.S. men, in the military kind of experienced and just, witnessed in this time period. So this film is based on a novel by Joseph Conrad called Heart of Darkness. There is a few changes to the setting because Heart of Darkness actually, I think, took place in the Congo, while Coppola kind of changed it to take place, in the midst of the Vietnam War. So an actually a film called Heart of Darkness that actually follows step by step to the novel was made in 1993. But here we are. So Coppola kind of takes his own spin on this novel called Heart of Darkness. So I think that kind of sets the scene for y'all with the kind of the historical background of this film. So I'm going to get into some actual information about the movie, which is the point of this. So we have Francis Ford Coppola as our director, producer, and co-writer. He co-wrote this script with John Milius. So this is really his film, I would say. So he is known for being a perfectionist, and just, although he's brilliant, he is just adamant about having this film the way he wants it. So it really just shows, the shooting was scheduled to take 6 weeks, and it ended up taking a year and a half. And also, their original budget was $12 million, and it ended up costing Zoetrope Studios, which is actually, Coppola's obviously production company, since he's the producer. So it actually ended up costing him $31 million, originally supposed to be $12 million. So you can kind of see that Coppola is just really taking advantage of his resources here and making sure this movie is exactly how he wants it to be, which ended up being worth it in the end because he gets a Golden Globe for Best Director. So this movie's 2.5 hours long. It's rated R, I would guess, for the gory parts of this movie and the language here. So it's really just kind of just a classic, what you would think of as a war movie. So really this film lays the groundwork for all the future war movies, whether it be Full Metal Jacket or Saving Private Ryan. You just see so many elements of this film that even I've seen in war movies in my lifetime more recently. So this film is just your classic war film. So we have Martin Sheen here, who is Charlie Sheen's father, as Captain Willard, who is our main character here. We have Marlon Brando as Colonel Kurtz. So, you know, we saw Marlon Brando in his 20s in the movie On the Waterfront. And here he is just totally and completely different. I mean, his acting is just brilliant here, though. So he's 55 in this film, so he's a little older than when we saw him before in On the Waterfront. We have Robert Duvall as Lieutenant Kilgore, who is actually quite the character in this film. He's pretty entertaining, and you know, he's kind of a more lighthearted, you know, funny aspect to this film. So Duvall actually ends up getting a Golden Globe for Best Supporting Actor, and he is literally on the scene for 11 minutes. He only gets 11 minutes of screen time in this film, and he wins Best Supporting Actor. So that kind of tells you, you know, the amount of talent that he has, you know, just almost captivating to audiences. So I'm going to move on to some elements that I really found really intriguing and interesting as I watched this film. So the first one I noticed was we have this narration by Martin Sheen throughout the movie where it kind of hops back and forth from like live audio to him kind of, you know, a voiceover of his voice coming in and explaining his thoughts, or, you know, just narrating throughout the movie, which I thought was really interesting. So he has this really unique grungy voice that's kind of just almost captivating. So an interesting fact about that actually is that some of these voiceovers were done after the film was, you know, finished. So actually Martin Sheen was unable to do some of the voiceovers after he was done with his original responsibilities. So his brother, Joe Estevez, actually ended up doing some of the voiceovers because their voices are almost identical. You wouldn't even know if you didn't know that before you watched the film. So I think that's kind of interesting that his brother actually took over for some of the voiceovers in the film. And there's literally no difference in their voices here. Another aspect of this movie that I really enjoyed was kind of the variation of shots here. So Vittorio Storaro actually wins an Oscar for Best Cinematography. So he is absolutely brilliant, has done so many films in his life, and it really shows in this film. I mean, I thought that the fact that there were so many different types of shots in this film really kept it interesting. It's just awesome that he can just be so versatile in all of these you know, types of shots and types of scenes. So we have these scenes where, you know, it's broad landscapes and, you know, broad views of, you know, battlefields and things like that. And then we have all of these shots of just these really intimate close-ups of these actors, which, you know, specifically Martin Sheen, there's so many just scenes where he just has these captivating close-ups where you just see all the details of his face and all the emotion and, you know, just really, really intimate shots. So I thought that the fact that this film hops back and forth from super, super intimate close-ups to these broad, beautiful, you know, scenes of these landscapes or, you know, these battlefields is just really kept it interesting to me. So another element that I would like to point out is that this film really highlights the dichotomy between these soldiers' humanity and the inhumanity of their war environment. So throughout the film, you know, it's following these men down this mission that Captain Willard has been sent on, and, you know, you see them dancing to music, you see them, you know, writing to their wives, to their parents, and, you know, you just see that these are humans sent out to this, basically this hellhole to, you know, possibly be killed here. So, I mean, you see like these men and how really human they are. That is in contrast the entire movie to just the horrible scenes of this war. So innocent people being killed and just the sheer inhumanity of this environment. So I mean, really, even one of the officers that Captain Willard is on the boat with, he's a 17-year-old. His name is Clean, or his nickname is Clean, and they get kind of barricaded by, you know, some, you know, rogue Vietnamese, you know, soldiers. So they're getting shot at, and he's only 17 years old serving in the U.S. Army for this terrible war that we're involved in. So he gets killed while he is listening to a tape from his mother So, you have this scene where this 17-year-old is dying from this bullet wound to his abdomen, and the tape from his mother is still playing out loud. So it really just tugs on your emotions there, that just these men who are here just absolutely in just this awful, awful place and experiencing these awful things, while their families are kind of expecting them to just come home without any mental or physical disabilities. And I think that's just was really a misconception. So this film really does a good job of kind of separating those two ideas of these men being just regular people, and then this environment of war that's just absolutely terrible. So another element that I'd like to point out is that this goes back to kind of the cinematography part of it. There's a lot of visuals that kind of contrast dark and light. So we have a lot of films that we've talked about this with already, including like Shadow of the Vampire and Beauty and the Beast and things like that. So Vittorio Storaro actually does a great job of using this contrast of light and dark visuals, whether it be like silhouetted landscapes, or there's a lot of powerful shots where half of someone's face is dark, and there's only light coming from this side. So there's just a lot of powerful things that play on the light and dark aspects here. So another kind of special element of this film is that actually there's no credits or no title. So usually either there's opening credits or there's credits at the end, and the only credit shown in this film is actually just the copyright to Zoetrope Studios. The lights just turned off. To Zoetrope Studios at the very end. So it's really kind of a special thing. I think that Coppola really originally wanted this movie to be toured, kind of like a play, to where audiences would receive a program with credits in it before the film actually starts. So the film we see nowadays has no credits and no title. The title actually appears in the background of a scene in graffiti in the actual film, which is in like the last 30 minutes. So you kind of have this idea where Coppola doesn't include this title, except for, in a scene where you wouldn't notice it if you weren't looking for it. So you see Apocalypse Now kind of written on this wall behind, the soldiers in the last 30 minutes of the movie, and I wouldn't have noticed it if I wasn't looking for it. So you kind of have this, that's different for us. We don't really know what to do with that, where there's literally no credits, there's no title. So it kind of just, you hop into the film, right away. I think some pretty important themes to this film also are really just, the first one I would say would really just be the general horror of the war, and kind of this question of, is the killing of these people and the killing of our own men really necessary here? So we really just see these just scenes where, just very unsettling scenes where it kind of leaves the viewer just questioning whether, this war was necessary, and all of this destruction and all of this, just absolute horror was necessary. And I just think that, maybe it wasn't. So it kind of leaves the viewer just asking if really this kind of brutality is really what we want to stand for here, in the United States. So that's kind of a question that I was left with, that I was left thinking about, is that if we, really look at the big picture, are these kind of wars, necessary for us to get involved in? So another theme that I kind of noticed was, just, I think Coppola is trying to point out that, every human has this element of darkness, and, that comes in with the novel that it's based off of. It's literally called Heart of Darkness. And I think that Coppola kind of wants to highlight that every human kind of has this element of darkness to them, which is not really the most positive and fun theme to think about, but I think that it is really portrayed very well in this film, and how, Captain Willard, actually, I don't really want to give away plot points, but you kind of see him evolve emotionally throughout the film, and kind of, almost give in to like the horrors of war. And his whole mission here is to stop basically an officer that has gone rogue, who has kind of succumbed to the horrors of this war. So you kind of see that it's easy for these humans to just kind of come under the influence of just all of this evil in their environment. So I think that Coppola is really trying to play on the fact that how humans can be so dark, and how they can be so evil, and how we can get involved in all of these things that are just absolutely brutal. So that pretty much wraps up all I want to say about this film. I really hope that you guys choose to watch it if you haven't seen it already. It's really a classic, and I'm telling you that you're going to see so many elements that you recognize that you've seen in your lifetime before, in all these, war films that are really modeled after Apocalypse Now. So I really hope you guys choose to watch it. Thanks for listening.